Good evening, and welcome to another gloomy version of Diatribes. Now here's your garrulous and guilt-ridden host, voice of Doom. Hello. Alright. I said I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it, and I don't want to. It's not going to be the kind of diatribe that's going to have you laughing and snickering at my witty repartee. Because I wanted to talk about my history with various pets and animals in my life. And it's depressing, and I'm going to try to keep it together, and you're probably going to cry. So I wanted to make this diatribe series an account of my life, and I've told you almost every detail. In fact, I've told you every detail. I've told you everything about my life, including stuff that may be embellished, but it's not. So, the only thing I haven't really talked about is my history with dogs and cats. Now, I did my last diatribe this morning at 4:30, and then I was still having insomnia, so I decided I'd saunter down to the casino and take my coffee with me because I don't want to drink alcohol that early. And guess who should be at the door when I go out to my car? The cat. Comes sauntering in like it's nothing, all hungry. So I know she's not going to neighbor's house and getting fed. So I was happy about that, because since she did get that injury, I was afraid that some coyote might have smelled something and attacked the cat, and I didn't want to think about that, because what they do, I've seen animals with other animals, and you don't want to think about it. It's survival of the fittest. It's the food chain. And that's just the way it is. But it got me thinking about pets. Now, I'll get through this real fast. I don't want to have to do this again. I grew up in Seattle when I was in elementary school, and we had a pet when I was an infant. And there's pictures of me when I'm 2 or so. And there's cute pictures of me with the dachshund, Trinka. I never really remembered that dog because that dog died before I started getting to the age where I could remember. My dad actually hit the dog with the car because dachshunds are very short and they're not that bright. So they aren't as good as cats at getting out of the way of cars, and that's what happened. Now, in those days, you just let your pets go outside. You didn't have all these laws and all these litigations where you had to worry, we just let the dog go, and cats, of course. But let's move on. I was 5 when I first started remembering things. I can remember back to kindergarten, and I had a dog named Trina. Big fat dachshund. Always fat, and we didn't feed her that much. We fed her 1 Gainsburger a day, and she still couldn't lose weight. But she had a lot of personality, and I could tell you a few stories, but I don't want this to drag out too long. She could run like the dickens, even though she was overweight, and her stomach was had calluses on it from dragging on the ground because she was that big. And she'd always nuzzle me when I'm watching TV on the couch. She'd jump up and she'd stick her nose under my arm. And she wouldn't stop doing that until I put my arm around her. So that was my dog from about the age of 5 until I was 10 or so, 11. And then we moved to Hawaii. Now there's rules in Hawaii where you have to quarantine your dog for 3 months if you bring one from the mainland, because they don't want rabies there and they don't have any. And the dog was old and gray by that time, so we thought that it wasn't good to have her in some sort of a pound environment for 3 months. And so we gave the dog away. Now, when you grow up with a dog for 5 or 6 years, when you're a little kid, just giving a dog away is a traumatic thing. But to add insult to injury, we took the dog to a family who seemed to like the dog, and there was kids, and so I left. And then when we got in the car and started driving away, the dog heard our car and escaped from the house and ran after us. So I'm looking at the back window, watching my dog run after me, and I felt guilty. And I felt like, I hope that what they tell me is true, that dogs can't remember more than 3 days, so that the dog will forget about us and enjoy the rest of her life. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, we betrayed her. Okay. So we moved to Hawaii. No dogs for a while. And as time goes on, you acclimate yourself to the place, and there's dogs that have been born on the island, so they don't go into quarantine. Now, the next thing that happened was, I was living on Oahu, and my parents said, and I was about to move to the Big Island and start a whole new venture, but my parents said, we have the best present for you. You're going to love this present for Christmas. I just can't wait to give it to you. And I'm like thinking all kinds of great things. And when I woke up on Christmas morning, they were holding a big, long, black dachshund in front of my face, saying Merry Christmas. And I had to act overjoyed, but in the back of my mind I'm going, it's not practical. But here's a dog, and this dog was dysfunctional to the max. Every time you came near it, it peed, and it tried to escape every chance it could get. And it wasn't until a few months later that the dog kind of got used to me and followed me everywhere I went. And I named the dog Ainsley Dunbar after a drummer from Frank Zappa and Journey, because I liked the name. So Ainsley was a mess, and I don't know if you've ever seen a person with a dachshund by the throat up against a wall. But when I came home one day, my roommate had Ainsley up against the wall. He wasn't going to kill the dog, but he was extremely mad because as I looked around on the porch, I saw leaves and branches of our pot plant we were growing. So I realized why the dog was in trouble. So I moved to the Big Island, and the dog is with us and still following me around and trying to escape, and it escaped and got run over. And I was pretty broken up over that. Then no dogs for a while, and then moved out to Oahu and no pets. I was associated with different animals here and there. I realized that golden retrievers are very great dogs and very smart, but I never had one. I was a roommate with one once. And various cats and dogs that come and go. Now, when I got married, my wife was given a baby Pomeranian. And there is nothing cuter, the most cutest thing in the world on this planet of all the creatures, great and small, is a baby Pomeranian, a puppy. They're little fur balls about the size of a tennis ball, and they got two big eyes looking at you and a nose. And they're just irresistible. They're just the greatest. And I think that if I was going to try to establish world peace and have peace talks, I would bring all the adversaries together and give them each a baby Pomeranian to hold. And I think peace would prevail. But the dog was inbred. It was a pure breed Pomeranian, but it was inbred. So it was a mess, and it was kind of like a Wolverine. And I got used to it, and I really, really loved that dog. I've never loved a dog like that, except for maybe Trina, but this time I was an adult and raised it from a pup myself. And even the veterinarian said you should actually put the dog down because it's actually so badly inbred that it's just wild. But we weren't going to do that. And we ended up getting another Pomeranian, which was the daughter of Pomeroy, my baby. And we named that Coco. Now, this is where it gets really sad. We raised those dogs. Coco even had a litter of pups, and my wife had to deal with them. We were going to start a little cottage industry of raising Pomeranians. Don't raise dogs unless you know what you're doing. It's not a sideline that you just do. You got to know what you're doing, and you got to get the AKC papers and stuff. So if you're going to raise dogs and sell them for a good chunk of change, then you got to know what you're doing. So don't consider doing that. So what did we do? We moved to Carson City with the dogs. I remember driving a U-Haul truck through Central California, through Sacramento to Carson City from LA, and I was dragging a car behind it. I think I told you this story, but the two dogs were in the cab with me, so it was really fun. I'm driving a truck, never driven a truck before, dragging a car, towing it with two dogs. Now, they lived longer, and then after a while, Pomeroy deteriorated. And small dogs, when they deteriorate, they get hunched over and, bad things. They get they break down. They're not big dogs. They are just furry, but they look like chihuahuas if you give them a haircut. And the dog was suffering, but it was a long process. And the dog was whining, and I was tired. And when you're really tired and trying to sleep, and then you're woken up, and you're just irritable. And I just said, "Shut up," real loud, and then the dog was quiet. And I got up the next morning, and he was gone. And I broke down. I lost it. Not because I didn't know that the dog was going to die, but that the last words I said to the dog were, "Shut up." I'll never forget that. And I don't want to remember it again. And I'm never going to talk about this again. So this is it. Coco died about a year later, and I vowed that I wouldn't do the same thing. So every night, I checked on the dog. And I hope dogs don't they have karma, but I don't want to face the dog later and have to say, I'm sorry for what I did. But that's the bad thing. And now I said to my wife, I don't want any more pets, because they die, and they only live 10 to 15 years, which means you have like 10 pets in your lifetime. And I just don't want to go through it. So the first thing she did is got a cat from the pound, which is the cat we've been looking for. And I'm like, all right, cat is, they go in their sandbox and pretty independent. And I swear this cat was a reincarnation of my ex-girlfriend, the one that got me into Buddhism, that my wife hated so much, because she hated that cat with a passion. And the cat loved me and hung around me all the time. She said, well, there's another cat there, and I want it for Benjamin. It's a kitten, a gray, blue Russian. And I was like, I don't really want to. Well, she got that cat for Benjamin, and that's Brutus, and he's around here, and he's a regular old cat. And nothing weird about him. He's not dysfunctional. And I said, okay, that's it. And then I come home about 3 days later, and there's a Pomeranian sitting on my bed. The dog that's been sniffling and snuffling and giving me trouble. And then I'm like, why would anyone leave a Pomeranian this beautiful Oreo colored and take him to the pound? Well, I found out why. The dog was like living, it's like living with a shoat, with a weasel. I mean, not a weasel like the dog's underhanded, but it's just wild. You can't pet it, you can't grab it, you can't take it outside. And it's always sitting there begging and wagging its tail for food and spinning around, thinking that's going to, amuse me, so I give her a snack. But I can't pet the dog. And we've had it for over 10 years. So I have a Pomeranian that is neurotic. I have 2 cats. And I don't want any more pets after this. Even if I'm old and alone, because I can't handle it. So I'm not going to talk about this again. I'm lucky I got through it. And I know that it was depressing. I'm sorry, but it's all part of my documentation of my existence. And I had to throw that in there. There's more stories, but I'll tell you one quick one. My mom was always going into the hospital because she had asthma and she had other ailments, so she'd have an attack every so often and have to be taken. And I remember standing with the dog watching the ambulance load her up and petting the dog, and she knew something was wrong. This was Trina, the fat dachshund. And for 2 or 3 days, because they used to keep people in the hospital for like a week and not charge you an entire mortgage of your house to do it. So my mom was in the hospital and the dog wouldn't eat. And so we were talking to her on the phone, and we called the dog over and put the phone next to her ear, and her voice was on the phone saying, I'm okay. So I'll be home soon so you can eat and not worry. And the dog went straight to its food bowl and started eating. It's just a little anecdotal thing. So that's that. I don't want to talk about pets anymore. So have a good night.